Well, before I introduce our next panelists, I'd like to point out that before fashion designers started being invited to design costumes for dance, many dance companies invited artists to do so, often with disastrous results from the point of view of the dancers and choreographers. So if you look in the book, for example, Oscar Schlemmer's the costumes for triadic ballet were hard to even move in, let alone dance in. Picasso did enormous constructions which were difficult to dance in. And there are endless accounts of choreographers, one of Balanchine, who kept snipping away at this one designer's costumes, which not only prevented or impeded the dancer's movement, but also made it impossible to really see what those movements were. Another time that Diaghilev hired an artist to do something, and then the choreographer Bronislava Nijinská was saying, this would be fine for an opera where they just stand there, but it's absolutely impossible for the dancers. So it's too easy to blame fashion designers. I think artists also have often considered the costume and the visual effect perhaps more than the issue of the movement of the dancer. Now, the first time I met LeeAnét Noble was at one of the most exciting fashion shows I've ever been at. It was in Paris for Rick Owens' collection about a year and a half ago. And instead of having fashion designers come out, there were, how many, 20, 25, 40 steppers appeared in fashions that Rick had specifically designed as fashions, but also that could be danced in with a particular kind of very energetic movement, which is characteristic of stepping. And LeeAnét Noble, as a dancer, choreographer, was responsible for choreographing that fashion show, which was the fashion show of the year and then some, was truly transformative. Not least because it brought in front of the fashion world the importance of having women of color on the fashion runway, which is still in this day surprisingly rare. I'd also like to introduce Elizabeth Way, who's one of the newest members of the curatorial team, but is already very accomplished, having published and given a number of speeches at different conferences. So please join me in welcoming LeeAnét Noble and Elizabeth Way.
Thank you so much, Valerie. And to add on, I'd just like to introduce LeeAnét a little further. She's an internationally and critically acclaimed choreographer, dancer, actor, and musician with over 20 years of experience as a professional dancer. Under the tutelage of her mother, Loretta Noble, who's also here with us today, and her grandmother, Lancy Malloy, she began dancing and performing at the age of 2. She performed lead roles in Stomp and Drumstuck, and worked with such artists as Rihanna and Alicia Keys. As Valerie noted, she performed and choreographed and co-directed with her mother, Rick Owens' Spring-Summer 2014 show, which fused stepping, diverse models, and his vicious line of clothing for Paris Fashion Week. The Noble women have numerous productions and seek to fuse a variety of art forms into one loud announcement of beauty and power. And I think that's a wonderful way to kind of transition into the history of African American dance and its impact on the American dance scene, and as Rick Owens, one example of its impact worldwide. And so researching and reading about African American dance, what becomes so clear is its syncretic nature. This is just a very syncretic society in general, bringing together aspects of so many different parts of culture, not just African elements, which are still so evident in modern African American dance, but also European, new forms, bringing everything together. It's really extraordinary. And so I want to start by asking you to explain the history of step dancing, because it is very specific and very interesting. And then your own personal history as dance. As we can see, you've studied many forms.
Yeah, that's just a few years ago right there. Yeah, I had a very formal training in dance, ballet, tap, jazz. But something that I always embraced was playing on the streets with my friends and creating rhythms. And just finding a way to make music, even if you don't have an instrument, but using your body and then infusing dance forms such as jazz and hip hop and so forth into those movements. So stepping has a very rich history. During the slave trade, African people were not allowed to bring their drums with them. And drumming and rhythm is such an important part of the culture that it forced them to try to create those rhythms and create that communication with their bodies. And you see a lot of forms starting like that, percussive dance forms such as tap dance and stepping. As the years went on, you have fraternities such as Alpha Phi Alpha, which this is a picture of here, founded in 1906. And these fraternities were about unity. It was about connecting with each other, and they were founded at colleges. Alpha Phi Alpha was founded at Cornell University, and from there on you had many that started at Howard University, and it was about connecting with each other. And they found a way to showcase themselves through rhythm and stepping together, and it was very militant, and it was serious, and it was intense, and it was saying, don't mess with us in a way. That we're tough and we're strong and we're standing together. And that's where you see the foundation of stepping. There's a lot of stepping competitions and so forth. The female groups, the sororities, then embraced stepping as well, and they did it in their own fashion. You had some like the AKAs who did a lot of stepping in high heels and sophisticated dresses, and then you had others that went hard just like the guys did.
Thank you so much. And I'd just like to add just a little bit that Hellman Melville, anthropologist who also was the mentor of Katherine Dunham, noted that in no other aspect of culture could you see the direct line of the African influence as much as you could through dance. And can you talk a little bit about the combinations of different influences that go into stepping? We see military drilling, not only just the African rhythms, some social dance in there as well.
Stepping has many different influences. So you have South African gumboot dance, which the miners in South Africa, going through intense conditions and hardships, were able to find rhythms in that and gave themselves joy through creating rhythms with slapping their boots. And that is the most direct form of dance that you see, African form of dance that you see influencing stepping. Stepping is an American dance form, just like tap dance. It has roots and pulled from a few other places, but it's something, what you see today with stepping is something that was a direct derivative from the fraternities, the African American fraternities and sororities.
Can you talk a little bit about the role of dress, fashion, costume in stepping in general, how you use it with your choreography and your dance to express teamwork, the unity of the team, or the narrative of the dance?
A lot of times when you go to a step show in general, you see many different stories happening, and it's always something that you have to make sure that you go to the hilt with, because it is a competition. And so you're trying to one up the next team no matter what. And so you really want to show that intensity, but there also should be a story. I like to always tell a story with my dance, with tap dance, with whatever form of dance that I'm doing. When I'm on the stage, I want you to come away with a story. And I never want to say what the story is, but I want it to be just like a piece of artwork that you're looking at. Everybody takes something different. Everybody pulls something different from that story. One person might say, oh, that was a love story, and another one might say it was about death. You know, you want to make sure that no matter what, everybody's pulling their own story from what you're giving. With stepping, you see the men in suits there, but a lot of times everybody's dressed in unison. Something that was unique about what we did with Rick Owens was we weren't wearing costumes. We were wearing ready-to-wear fashion designs. So it's something that when somebody sees it, they can say, oh, I want to buy that, and they can literally go and buy it, versus, oh, this is a costume. So we had character, we had story, but it was also fashions that anybody could wear.
So please tell us a little bit more about how you collaborated with Rick Owens, how it started, how you met him, how he found you.
Well, many years ago, I worked with his creative director, Asha Mines, and my mother and I pulled her in for a show we were doing at the Kennedy Center, and she was our lighting designer. And she went over to Paris and connected with Rick Owens, and she's been with him for over 10 years now. And while she was there, I said, well, let me know if you ever need me, if there's ever anything, let me know. And so they had this vision of incorporating stepping. They wanted to take something, Rick Owens is an American designer in Paris, so they wanted to take an American dance form and use it in this fashion show. And once they had the idea of doing stepping, they knew about my background with Stomp and working with different step companies and so forth. So they called my mother and I and said, we need you to put this together and make this happen. And so we did the casting, we did the choreography, we directed the piece. He gave us full creative license as to who we were able to pick for the show, which was great. At first, I thought, in looking at some of his past pieces, he would have performers in the middle, and then he would have the models go around the performers or around the band. So that's what I thought was what was going to happen. And they said, no, you are the models. Okay. So that changed everything, and I think a lot of my dancers still didn't grasp that until we got there. And it was also interesting because a lot of them didn't know who Rick Owens was unless they were well versed in the world of fashion. And once they looked him up, then they became extremely excited, but they still didn't believe it. So it was something that was very unbelievable until a lot of them got to Paris, or at one point we even had to have Rick do like a video, like a Skype video, because they weren't believing us. They're like, wait, so you mean we're gonna go step in Paris on the runway for a top fashion designer, he's taking care of everything, right? So, finally, when he gave that Skype video and said hello to them, their mouths all dropped. And it was just an amazing experience. I cast half of my dancers in DC and the other half in New York, and I had a mixture. So you have some people out there who have no affiliation with sororities, and they just love the art form of stepping, and they've decided to embrace this as a career. And then you have college students who are pledging in sororities and also in sororities, and they step as a part of their team, but they're in school, to be architects and many different things. So we had one of our dancers got accepted into pharmacy school on the way there. So it was like half of the group that were from sororities and the other half were actually professional steppers. So we had a mixture, and there was a huge contrast in between the different groups. Those that have a passion to do this for their life, they believed it right away. They're like, okay, we're going. With the college students, they were really kind of like, right, so who is Rick Owens again? So it was an interesting thing, and we only had a few rehearsals with the whole group. There was one point where Rick came into town just to meet the girls, and I kind of got the call at the last minute, so we had to Rick wants to meet the girls, and this is his first time in New York in 15 years, and he's coming just to meet them. And so we had to go to DC, swoop those girls up real quick, and take them out of class, and grab the professional dancers to try to get as many girls there to meet Rick that we could. I was also a performer in the group, so I often had to step back and go in with the team so that I would have that feeling of being a part of the group, as well as being the choreographer. So that's where my mother stepped in as co-director and would make sure, that everything is lining up. They were very particular about lines and formation, and the stepping couldn't be too much, because we had to make sure that the emphasis was on the clothes and how the clothes move versus just a grand movement. So it was very unique in that way. Stepping is a dance form that's based on the rhythm that you make, and you're creating music with your body. For this particular project, Rick was premiering his new collaboration with Adidas, and the shoes were soft. They were sneakers. And he also likes to produce music, so he had created like this really loud, intense music. So it was really challenging in that way that this would be the first time where you're not relying on hearing each other with stepping. So we had to, the audience and everybody was just hearing the music. And it became, I would say, more of a fusion of a modern dance and stepping than just hardcore stepping, because we couldn't rely on the rhythms. We couldn't rely on even staying on beat. We didn't even get the music until towards the end of the project. So it was an interesting challenge to say, step, but don't step hard, and don't follow the music, and don't try to stay on beat. So it was an interesting challenge in that way.
At what point did the clothes enter into the choreography? Did you work out the routine before you saw the fashions, or were they there in your mind from the beginning?
It was very mysterious. We didn't see the clothes until we got to Paris, right before we performed. And even when we had the fittings, Rick came to do a whole fitting with us, and he put the clothes on us, and we tried them on, and then we said, "Are these the clothes we're wearing?" Maybe. So it was very secretive. Everybody was on a gag order about this project. The college students couldn't even tell their parents what they were doing, because it's such a competitive world, the fashion world. They were afraid another designer might try to do something similar. So, we even had a few of the girls' mothers that came with us, and they said, I didn't know what she was doing, but I knew she was going to Paris, and I was going with her. So it was interesting. We were able to look at his previous lines, and that was really about it. There would be times where I would try to trip him up a little bit, and I would say, well, I want to put a backflip and a clap under the leg and all these different things. And they would say, well, you can't really do that because, we're not going to be able to reach too far with some of the pieces. And I would say, okay. So they would kind of guide it like that. As I would send in videos of the choreography, they would respond and say, oh, this is okay, this is not okay because of the clothes. But we didn't really see him until we got there.
One of the comments that came up a lot after the show on the internet was the idea of the grit face. And first, I'd like you to explain a little bit about that, but also something I had read was that because you'd formed Team Vicious from several different stepping groups that had different styles, some a little more dainty, some a little more aggressive, and how some steppers had a harder time mastering the grit face. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. Again, stepping, there's a lot of competition, and you want to show your opponents that you are tough and they can't mess with you. And Rick saw some footage of some steppers making the grit face and making this intense face, and decided that was going to be the face that everybody wore. And we had some very dainty. We had performers. One thing is that since they did allow us to cast anyone we wanted, we were able to do everything based on talent. And so we had performers of all shapes and sizes. And some of them were used to stepping in a very particular fashion. They weren't used to doing the grit face. And we had to just have grit sessions where we would just growl at each other. And, my mother would get in their face and go, harder, harder. And, we stop laughing, this is not funny, over and over again. So we really had to get them to embrace this grit face, and some of them would try to talk their way out of it a little bit. Like, well, what if I have my own special grit face? And, it was something that was very particular, and everybody had to do it, and it was a part of the character. We're coming out, and we're saying, don't play with us, and we don't have to smile. We don't have to have smirks on our face to look beautiful. We're showing, it was a new concept of what beauty has been perceived as on the runway. And we challenge so many different things, from the sizes of our models, from the ethnicity of our models, from the way that our faces were positioned, from what we were wearing. We were in sneakers, these huge Adidas sneakers that Rick had designed, and a lot of us had on headpieces with our hair back and hair just blown out. And it was amazing the preparation that it took to get to get into that look in Paris. I think I had like a team of 5 people around me just flat ironing my hair to put it back in a ponytail and then to put a do-rag on top of it. So there was a lot of preparation that went into the process, and yeah, it was a challenge for some of them who were used to smiling all the time to be an intense grit face, but they rose to the challenge.
Can you talk a little bit about the audience at the fashion show? From researching stepping performances, especially at colleges, the audiences are really involved, they're rowdy, they're cheering on probably their friends, people they know. How did the fashion crowd react to your performance?
Oddly, very similar. We were told, oh, when you go to Paris, don't expect them to clap and yell and scream or do anything like that. And I was adamant about telling dancers, because you feed off of the audience's energy a lot of times, and it causes you to go harder, or it really changes how you perform according to how the audience reacts and what they give to you, especially in urban dance forms. You're used to seeing a tap dancer out there and doing different things, and they scream at them. That doesn't really happen in the ballet. So we weren't expecting much. We went there not expecting too much energy to come from the audience, and we really practiced just drawing from each other. But when we got there, with the first thing that we did, you heard oohs and ahs and screams, and there were so many people crying, which, took us back a little, like, why? Because they just felt the intensity of what we were doing. And we had a dress rehearsal. We had one dress rehearsal in the clothes, in the shoes, right before we performed. And I told my dancers, don't go all out because we have to conserve our energy for the show. Stepping is something that's usually done for about 2 minutes tops. So this was a piece that was 11 minutes long, and that's extremely long for that intense of a dance form. So when they got out there were a few people already in the audience, and just the energy that they gave us, everybody performed full out. And and I was, when I was watching them, I was like, stop, calm down, but everybody was cheering and everything, so they just went hard. And so when we got to the actual show, we had, right when we got to Paris, we went straight into rehearsal, and then we had to go straight into the performance the next day. And so a lot of the dancers were exhausted. By the time we got to the end of the piece, where we lock up with each other and do a train off the stage, everyone, you could feel everybody's energy, but the crowd gave so much that we were able to push through it, and we really wanted to push through it, and the reaction was amazing.
There was also a lot of reaction kind of on the internet after this show about the ethnicity, about the body types. And do you think that what role do you think dance played in allowing Rick Owens to kind of open up the dialogue on those issues? Do you think that it was specifically through step that he was able to do this, as opposed to just casting different types of models?
I think it was a few things. I think there were so many things to draw from this performance and this fashion show. One thing is that right when we finished the show, it went viral, and every performer of mine was on their phones and internet and reading reviews, and it was so instant. I didn't even realize that the whole world was looking at Fashion Week in Paris, but it drew in a lot of people that wouldn't normally look at a fashion show in Paris. A lot of people who didn't know about Rick Owens. A lot of people didn't know about the art form of stepping. And so it brought it to a really broader audience. I think that if he would have just cast diverse models in his show, which he has, I've seen his previous shows, and he usually is diverse in his casting, not as diverse as this show was. I think that it wouldn't have had the same impact. I think that the fact that a lot of these women were your average day-to-day women, that it allowed a lot of more people to embrace it. A lot of people were kind of thrown back by the faces and didn't know what that story was. In Paris, they didn't know what we were doing. They thought it was haka, and they thought it was all these different things. They're like, what is this dance form? What is it? What's happening? So I think that all of that as a collective added to the impact that it had. And it also became like one of his best-selling lines. A lot of people said, I didn't know who Rick Owens was before this, because it's not that cheap. But so it allowed a lot more people to embrace it and to look at, these fashion shows and what's happening in the fashion world. So I think everything added to it. I don't think it would have been the same if one part of it was different.
So stepping back a little bit and thinking about the history of African American dance and fashion, we see it intersect in so many different ways, from the cakewalk in the 1900s, Josephine Baker, Katherine Dunham, even Ailey, really looking at fashion and costuming. How has that affected you as a choreographer and a dancer personally, your relationship with fashion, whether high fashion or just your own style?
Well, the change that this was for me was right after we did this performance. We got calls from top magazines to do editorials. We were now, it was interesting for one editorial that I did for Flaunt magazine. I was able to wear Wang and Sally LaPointe and all these different designers. And I think the unique part of it was they weren't used to having models of our size in these editorials for top fashion magazines. We would go into a store in New York that just had fashion magazines and find ourselves in at least 30 different magazines. And it was just amazing to be thrown into that world. I've had a very eclectic career as a performer, from being a musician, from actor, choreographer, and I wouldn't have thought that I would be thrown into this world of fashion. It's something that I've always loved, but I never saw myself as being a model because of the pictures of models that you often see. You think you have to be a certain size, you think you have to have a certain look, and so forth. And so this was something that totally broadened my horizon as a performer. And I think a lot of my dancers too, they were posting pictures of themselves in magazines and they're like, I'm a model now. And so it was wonderful to know that, things, that there aren't always, that the limits that you see don't always exist. And with Rick Owens, his being that he had such excellent sales, I think after this project, it went up to like 140 million with his, as far as the sales of his line. And it really showed that you can step outside of the box and still be successful. I think a lot of people are afraid to do so because they think this has worked for so long, why change the recipe? And what he did was show that you can change the recipe and still be extremely successful. And the fact that so many new people embraced it was amazing. We now have projects where we're working with other fashion lines and designers, and it's a beautiful thing to do this fusion. A lot of times, like you were mentioning Katherine Dunham, you have ballets, you have dance performances where designers do the costuming. What we're doing is something a bit different because we're actually, like I said, wearing the ready-to-wear designs, and we're bringing the dance to the fashion world versus bringing the fashion to the dance world.
Can you talk a little bit more about some of your other projects, how Rick Owens has kind of opened you up to more exposure, but also things that you have been doing in the long run?
Well, after this, we had many productions that we had done previously, original works, Broadway shows, and things of that sort. And now this is allowed for a unique fusion. We've been touring, doing a lot of appearances at colleges and universities because the show that we did is now being incorporated into so many lesson plans and into the curriculum at so many different schools and universities and their fashion departments, because it was something that was so far out of the box from what anybody had seen before. And like this is a photo of us on tour, and we're wearing the latest line from Diesel, and we've had amazing designers that want to work with us, including Izzy Miyake, Sally LaPointe, and many others. So it really just opened us up to a new world of fashion and showing, another way for designers to show their lines. I think that, models will always be used, and I think this just allows for another avenue to show how the clothes move. This is a society where everybody's embracing working out and being active, and it shows that, this particular line or that line, the movement in the clothes. So yeah, just really opened us up to a lot more ways to fuse the two forms of dance and fashion.
Thank you. I just want to ask you one last question, kind of a little bit off topic, but in my research of African American dressmakers and kind of that tradition, I found so much that these skills, these knowledge, and this empowerment has been passed on from mother to daughter and through the generations. And I noticed that is very prevalent in your work. And we see your picture here with your mother. Can you talk a little bit about that, and maybe for you personally, but also how you found that has played a role in African American dancing?
Yeah, I think in the African American culture in general, so much is passed down. You have, and especially with like the art form of stepping and performing, and you really get a sense of your culture, and you really learn so much about it from what your parents tell you and what your parents teach you, and then you go out in the world and you get your own perspective and fuse that together. I grew up watching my mother perform, and I decided to follow in her footsteps. And my mother's mother was a classical singer who worked with the National Symphony Orchestra and Dizzy Gillespie, and so that also influenced my mother's path. So you have a lot of embracing that, and then I think something else that is unique is that as women, you go out in the world and you have there's so many different things that make you feel like you're limited. And you see your mother struggle, and you want to then improve from there. And your mother always wants the best for you, and for you not to have to go through what she went through. And I think we're passing this down generation to generation. I do a lot of work with students in the schools, and them seeing this project that we did, they saw girls that were the same size as them, the same color as them, that they weren't used to seeing before. And it just let them know how far their dreams can go and how wide this world can be if we just take that risk, if we just take that challenge. And I think by one person taking that challenge, it allows for another person to see, okay, I can do that too. Yes.
Thank you, LeeAnét, so much for coming to the museum a second time. Team Vicious also performed at the Dance and Fashion opening, and so thank you again for coming back.
Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions?
LeeAnét, I know you're going to be doing a workshop here at FIT. You want to talk just a little about that?
Sure. On November 18th, we're going to give the public a master class and a workshop that's going to allow them to learn the moves that we actually did for Rick Owens' SS14 show. And I believe it's already sold out, so that's great. And we're really just going to give them like an inside view of what we did. I think a lot of people, go to classes to learn how to model and to learn how to walk a certain way, but this will teach everybody how to step down the runway.
And if you haven't seen the Rick Owens show, I encourage everyone to Google it. It's really amazing.
Well, I was wondering about the challenges you had with the girls in different groups, especially because you don't have exactly that call and response that you normally have because you have music there and they're in different areas. Like, what did you do to bring them together to perform as a team?
We did a lot of exercises and just I would say kind of games and ways that we could rely on going purely by what we see. And because it's so important to stay in sync with each other without actually hearing what the feet are doing. And so we had to make sure that that was something that would be attainable in doing the choreography. I didn't focus on doing a lot of intricate rhythms versus more broad movements, more more movements with the upper body and shapes. So that's what we focused on so we could stay in sync with each other. And then once we got the music, we were able to just focus on where we fell into the music. Again, the music was very eclectic, I'll say. There wasn't anything, and it changed a lot, and it did a lot of different things, so we couldn't rely on it too much. So it was more so just about making sure that everybody had sight lines to see each other and to make sure that we stayed in sync with the movements versus the actual rhythms that we were making.
Thank you both so much. I just had a question about the hair and makeup. Did he collaborate with you at all on that, or base it on traditional step performances, or was that purely from a fashion standpoint?
It was purely from the world of Rick Owens, and we didn't know what to expect. They just said, "Come as you are," and there were some tears from some of the girls. It was a very extensive process. Some of them had never had heat on their hair before, and I think also a lot of the people that we were working with, the makeup artists and the hairstylists, weren't that familiar with us. And so they literally would say, well, I haven't really worked with hair like this before, but we're going to try this and try that. So it's kind of like an experiment of sorts for them. And so for some, it was just, wild hair. Others, like I said, I think my hair was straightened for hours just to be put back. And so it was very interesting in that fact, and he wanted everything to look natural. So there was nothing fancy about the makeup. It was just mostly foundation and natural colors.
Question has to do with the step dancing. There is a Chicago form of stepping, and I wanted to know and it's a lot smoother than the fraternity style. Is there any relationship between the two? Did the Chicago step grow out of the fraternity type stepping, or can you speak to that?
Yeah. So with the Chicago type stepping, and in other areas, it's called different things. Like in Washington, D.C., they call it hand dancing. And it's very similar to the Chicago stepping. And it's like a smooth partner dance. And I would say the origins of those dances are not connected, but I would say that now, because collegiate stepping has changed so much and is infusing so many other types of dance, that now you can see more of a connection. They have the sororities do something called a stroll, where they move in very smooth and do more contemporary dances before they go into the intense stepping. And I see that fusion there now. But the origins, I believe, are not connected.
Great. Well, if there are no more questions, please join me in thanking LeeAnét.